This is an RNZ podcast.
It is Midweek Mediawatch o'clock. Joining me now from our studio in Wellington is Mr. Midweek Mediawatch, Colin Peacock. Kia ora, Colin.
G'day.
The Herald's new live-streamed video news service, Herald Now, went live on Monday. Did you catch it?
I did, yeah. The first 2 days, in fact, didn't see this morning's one, but always exciting, isn't it, when a new program starts up, particularly a new kind of thing. They had given it a bit of a road test from that studio because they did a live show on Budget Day with the host Ryan Bridge. But the first Herald Now, as it's called, all seemed to go pretty smoothly. So it screens from 7 a.m. till after a news bulletin about 6 or 7 minutes past 9 a.m. every day. They launched it with a good scoop, twinned up with the New Zealand Herald and Michael Morra, formerly of News Hub, who, of course, he knows his way all around a TV camera in a TV studio. And they also have, by the way, running all of this, the former MediaWorks chief news editor, Sarah Bristow, who's running it. She's NZME's managing editor of their multimedia content. So, yeah, she knows how to do television as well. Got a little bit of audio then from Ryan Bridge, the host, just kicking it off on the first day.
It's Monday the 26th of May. Great to have you company. This is obviously a brand new show. It's all of the big news interviews that you need for your day in one place. We're broadcasting live from inside NZME's newsroom, which means all of these people behind me are getting sick of me. I've been doing rehearsals for a week. On the show today, welfare crackdown. New benefit sanctions kick in today. David Seymour is live at the desk and we've got an advocate joining us for the other side.
Yeah, so that's what it sounds like. So if you can imagine a fairly modest TV studio and picture Ryan Bridge sitting there staring down the camera delivering it, that's what it sounds like. And I was just guessing news show. I'm sure David Seymour's going to be on there on day one, and sure enough he was within about 12 minutes. But he doesn't go on Morning Report, so I guess he's got time to go on Herald Now and probably see him quite a bit.
All the news interviews you need is the billing there, which is a big call. Did it live up to that?
Well, on the first day, they had Nicola Willis talking about post-budget stuff in the studio. The next day, and as well as David Seymour, the next day, Simeon Brown was in there talking health, Chris Hipkins as well, leader of the opposition. So, they were there, right there in the studio. So far, so good. Politicians clearly prepared to go in there and do it. But as well as that, there's other sort of stylistic stuff that's important when you're looking at it. It's got a moving ticker at the bottom with headlines, trails, what's coming up next, weather basics, and all of that. And I think that's pretty critical for anything that you're trying to catch people's eye with, particularly on a mobile or a tablet or something like that. But the important thing to note, I reckon, is that it's all the interviews you need, possibly not, but it's really news-driven and hooks up with what they're doing on the Herald and News Talk ZB, the other parts of that company, NZME. You see the business desk staff like Garth Bray, formerly Fair Go, so he, again, another experienced TV performer, he's on it, and they get the best of the day's business stories on there through that hookup with Business Desk. They also did something which I think is interesting. They hook up, for example, on day one, it was with their Christchurch Bureau for South Island news updates. On Tuesday, they went to the Rotorua Daily Post, talked about a couple of news stories there in Vision. And that's something I thought we would see a lot when, Stuff took over the 3 News, that they would use these, and they tend not to do that. But the one thing that I think some of the critics have pointed out as a bit of a flat spot is this recorded bulletin they have at the top of the hour. So it's Neva Retimanu in the ZB news studio reading out the bulletin in Vision. But it's got little pictures slotted in as she's speaking, B-roll type pictures. And it's a recorded bulletin, so it's not read live. And, there's the very real risk that by 9 o'clock, that could be out of date. It certainly was on, I think, Tuesday when they'd had that Liverpool FC parade accident. There was nothing much about that. And I think Gavin Ellis, former Herald editor, in his review noted that they were talking about weather warnings until 9 a.m. in a bulletin that was actually running just after 9 a.m. So, yeah, that's a risk. That part possibly doesn't work.
The big challenge with anything new, of course, particularly a project as ambitious as this, is getting people to actually tune in and at least try it out.
Exactly, yeah, and they do make it discoverable. It's on live streaming on YouTube, although when I looked for it, where can I get this, the sort of explainer article, it didn't actually mention that, which I thought was weird. When I was on the app trying to get it that way on day one, there was a kind of pop-up came across the screen saying check it out, and you could click it, and then when that feed, if I changed screens, the feed just fell away. It wasn't like it kept on playing like a little inset window, but maybe that was to do with me having an Apple phone. I don't know. But so then you had to go and find it again, and went back to the Herald homepage on the phone, the mobile app, and couldn't find the link to it again. So yeah, maybe a bit of work to do there. But I can report that I was striding around the streets of Petone near Wellington, watching it on 4G in the rain. I was literally walking up and down Jackson Street, and the stream held up fine. And I lost it a couple of times when I went to other things on the phone, but then was able to get back to it. And it certainly worked out well as a mobile experience, yeah.
That's interesting. Does it look like a, I guess for lack of a better word, like a proper TV news show, or is it more a cheap and cheerful replica impression of a... So that feels kind of disparaging. I don't mean that in a disparaging way.
I think that it's exactly the right way to put it, because it's really hard. Television is expensive, big studios, lights, sound, with specialist people all over it, and it's hard to do that. And for something to look good on like a mobile app or a desktop computer or laptop or something like that, it doesn't need to be quite as fancy. And indeed, even, TVNZ breakfast program, for example, you'll now see, people leaning into their Zoom cameras being shown live, whereas back in the day, they would have sent a camera around or something like that. So the expectation probably isn't as great, but you certainly notice it. For example, when that channel GB News launched in Britain.
Yeah, all bad technical problems. Audio problems, which are the worst, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there have been some audio hiccups on Herald now, where people start talking and their mic's not on or not faded up properly. But that sort of thing is definitely fixable. In fact, look, RNZ, didn't make a huge success of trying to do in-vision stuff. And like I was saying, that thing about the graphics and the moving information at the bottom of the screen when you don't have it. RNZ did its first election night with almost no graphics. And as a viewing experience, it just doesn't stack up. So it's hard to do that stuff well. But Herald now certainly does do that. They have road tested, because I don't think they've had that long to put it together, maybe 3-4 months. Although previously they've been doing live election specials and so on from their studios. But they certainly make it work. They can certainly connect to other studios and, Nicola Willis in Parliament, for example. They had this morning, I think it was, was it yesterday, beg your pardon, Ethan Manera, who's just been hired from News Talk ZB in Wellington, was outside the Satterthwaite family home in Palmerston North, bringing on updates on that, that terrible tragedy that befell Ryan Satterthwaite, the 19-year-old, and so that was extremely televisual. So yeah, they'll certainly get there with it, but parts of it technically are not up to what you'd expect from, say, a Television New Zealand live program.
Yeah, were there any sort of I guess not to focus on the negatives, but any points, any weak points in the show, or things that you think
I was trying not to be too critical, but they have brought back a feature. Do you remember the AM show on TV3, the old Mediaworks one? Yeah, after 8, the program would kind of die a bit. They'd have their bulletin. They'd been on air for a couple of hours. You could kind of understand it, but they'd fill it up with a panel, a couple of guests talking about stuff in the studio. So that is a real flat spot in this one, because as I was saying, it is very news driven. So for example, little example here, on the first day, they had Matt Heath, one of their own ZB hosts, an in-house guy, appearing to talk about the day's stuff. And they had Dame Julie Christie, reality TV entrepreneur. And the first question for her was all about the big Auckland FC semi-final the previous weekend.
It's a great story, and I just happen to have been making a documentary series with them since 3 months before the first kickoff. Okay. So we've been deep inside it, and the access has been remarkable. I've been making sports stops in this country for a long time, but what Nick Becker and Steve Corica have done, Steve Corica, who's mic'd all the time, who just said to me, "Oh dear," about the swearing. And I was like, well, actually, Danny Hay, the assistant coach, is worse, so don't worry. But, so we've been making a series for Sky.
Yeah, so I am being picky now, but that was a bit selfish. She went on to say what a genius Bill Foley, the billionaire owner of Auckland FC, is, and what he'd done with his American sports franchises and all that sort of stuff. And I thought it was a bit, like about her own business, making this show about Auckland FC, which maybe we'll talk about a little later if we get the chance. But Mark Jennings, for example, former Mediaworks head of news and TV3 boss,
launched the AM show.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, and he thought that she was great and she should be a regular, and it was great to see her. So I don't know. But also, like Ryan Bridge himself brings his sort of personality to it. He does the sort of typical ZB style thing of having a bit of an on-air editorial short rant about things which you wouldn't see on say breakfast TV or something like that, or even that old AM show. So it's got that sort of ZB element too, but that just differentiates it. But also that interesting question, I guess, is if it takes off, will people be watching him and listening to him and not to Mr. Hosking on the other ZB channel? That might cannibalise a bit of their audience.
That's interesting. I mean, the big question, of course, will be: is it getting advertising? Will it make money? Will it pay for itself? Yeah,
because I had thought there would be ads and logos and things all shot through it, because that's why they're doing this, to monetize video. But it wasn't like that. There were only a few ad breaks. They've got 2 Degrees as a sponsor that also sponsors their business stuff, and then a few big brands like Noel Leeming, Barker's, that dresses the host, also had an ad on there. But you would need more, because I think the ambition is to make this a full kind of fast channel, free advertising supported streaming television. And to do that with other shows, blow it out through the morning, you would probably need more.
Sticking with NZME, let's talk a bit about, any more information on this possible takeover, board revolution? It's hard to, I thought that this had reached a conclusion last week. Next week,
yeah. I mean, they have got a sort of compromise solution if the shareholders go for it, and we did talk about that. But yeah, we bring this up every week, so I felt like we almost need to. But one small development, which was the activist shareholder Jim Grennan, the billionaire from Canada, that really wanted to take control of the board, and now wants to shape it with slightly less ambition. He has acquired the shares of another shareholder, Troy Bowker, so he now owns 13% of NZME, so a bit of intent there. And do you remember Hayden also talked to you about a story with NZME, unrelated to that takeover, but that they looked like they had hired, without even their staff knowing it, offshore digital producers.
That's right.
And the Post picked up that story as well, and says, they believe there's 6 of them, and that the staff had flippantly referred to them as our biggest secret, because the overseas staff had generic little animal avatars on their Slack channel instead of actual photos. And it seems like the staff weren't fully informed about exactly what was happening there, but that's a little update on that one. And the other thing, though, about that meeting that's coming up, the big shareholder vote next week, is that the National Business Review, NBR, Nicholas Poynton, inquired about media access and was told there won't be any. They won't be able to report from or record the shareholders' meeting.
Is that usual?
Some companies do that, and the expectation isn't always there that it will be open to the media. But the NBR says, look, for NZME shareholders' meetings and AGMs, that's not the normal practice at all. And their documents that they put out for shareholders are posted to the NZX as well, which are very interesting documents. So not really usual, but very ironic, isn't it? A media company that's reforming itself and wants editorial change doesn't want other people to necessarily see how the meeting at which this will take place might unfold.
Now, the last time you were on Midweek Mediawatch, Colin, sitting opposite me in this very studio, Jim Grennan's ally, Philip Crump, had just posted 6 golden rules for journalism and rebuilding trust. Is there any more on that?
No, he has not posted any further ones, but that didn't go down well with journalists, and it did draw, if anyone's interested, they go and have a look at it, the LinkedIn page of the NBR's Tim Hunter. He writes there very eloquent column, Shoeshine, most weeks, not every week, but on his own LinkedIn page, it kind of summed up where we were heading with this when we talked about it, saying that these are things that are discussed in newsrooms. The things he's saying are not necessarily big new discoveries. So this was the way Tim Hunter put it. Crump's shock discovery of normal journalistic practices going back 100 years or more is not some new phenomenon. Yes, a politician may be described as embattled. Philip Crump had said that was a kind of example of loaded language. It should be done away with. It's a way to provide context in a story, easily digested background, standard journalistic discipline to explain why someone is embattled later in a story. It's not a sign of bias, it's just standard style. In the history of journalism, some editors don't like it, some do. As an explanation for declining trust, nope, says Tim Hunter. And he also points out that if Philip Crump is on the editorial board, NZME shareholders will end up paying Philip Crump for this expertise. I think he's using the word ironically. He says, if all this is a misguided attempt to insert one person's stylistic preferences onto a news outlet, it would be merely annoying. What's more concerning, says Tim Hunter, is the political subtext. So, yeah, he didn't react well to the 6 golden rules that Philip Crump had shared on Substack.
From NZME to RNZ, and some listenership stats were out this week for RNZ National. Not good numbers for this station. Some bad headlines as well. The Post, thousands nationwide turn off RNZ radio programs. The Herald, RNZ National and Morning Report radio audiences fall to lowest levels in more than 5 years, Colin.
Yeah, look, in one sense, it is what it is, these figures. So the commercial ones came out a couple of days earlier, but RNZ National, 467,000 people in an average week. That's down 22,000 from the previous survey. These are quarterly ones that it's a complicated system, but they kind of overlap. So one quarter drops off and they're averaged out over 4 quarters. So the point of it is that where RNZ National had 2020 had been surfing a wave of high ratings, was the number one listened to station of all genres, speech, radio, music, whatever. Now it's 8th. News Talk ZB, the other nation's big national speech network, 647,300 weekly. So that's a gap of 180,000, pretty substantial. And there's lots of music stations like More FM, ZM, The Edge, The Rock, etc. that are outrating it. But it's also, the thing is that a bunch of shows and different shows at different times all losing audience from this survey to the previous results. Morning Report down 20,000, 9 to noon about the same, Checkpoint only fractionally down, Saturday morning about another 20,000 there too. So those are the figures, and in one sense this matters more to commercial organisations. They really live or die and set their ad rates on these figures, but for RNZ it's about the reach and the return for investment, because it's a
justifying the money that you get from the taxpayer, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Interesting moment for RNZ in that web stats, digital stats way up, trust scores are up as well, but losing radio audience, particularly in Auckland, and these budget cuts as well. Yeah,
so all of this, whatever RNZ's response to this is, all that is part of the context. And yeah, RNZ did release this news along with their upswing in trust in the survey they do for their own purposes. So yeah, that gave them something good to couch the bad figures with. But those web stats, that's interesting too, because they can now say, look, we are reaching, I think they're saying 79% of the country because either with our own content or the radio programming or the content sharing that goes out to other media companies. And the website thing is big, 400,000 more visitors to the website than in April 2024, so going back a year. Users also spending twice as long on the site as last year. RNZ has picked out all these findings as well as their Varian survey on trust that finds that is up as well. So I guess they could say, well, okay, people may be listening to us less on the radio, but as a total package of the output for the taxpayers' money, etc., it's reaching still more people. So on one hand, no panic, you're still getting a substantial audience that's tuning into output, that's fulfilling the RNZ Charter, which is about not, in part at least, about not overlapping with commercial broadcasters and what they do. So maximising audiences isn't the major driver. And that peak 5 years ago was a different emergency time. And there have been weird slumps and falls before, 2014, 2018. That also happened. But look, the other point is that this trend is definitely there over the 5 years. Thousands fewer are tuning in. That's established. It's across the week, as I was saying before, on different shows and times. ZB has not had such a loss of listeners or equivalent trend over that time. And RNZ has for a long time tried to attract more listeners in Auckland and made that a priority, at times with some success, but not now, it seems, at this point. And they've recently rejigged some shows, and that has not paid off so far. So you would say there that the strategy would need to change, because the big worry would be losing listeners in the thousands who have been long-time listeners, or at least are in the demographic where RNZ has traditionally attracted them. And RNZ is trying to look at why people who have listened for some time have drifted away, and doing some more in-depth research with that. And that, I'm sure, is going to go on as a result of this.
Well, someone has texted in diagnosing the problem, Colin. Night's host Emil Donovan, the trivial quiz show, egotistical host who, when he interviews, talks more than his interviewees. There you go. We figured it out. That's
one thing. I mean, I don't know. I tuned in to hear the start of the program. I just heard you and Wallace Chapman talking about $250 haircuts.
No, you missed the point of it. We're talking about the...
I'm being deliberately mischievous. But
Rachel has actually sent us a text, Colin, asking, could you please say how those radio numbers are actually captured?
Well, this is the thing. It's a method that's unlike the television ones, which are almost day-to-day, almost live sort of numbers. This is still on reporting, so there's a survey audience, people who are picked to fill out. I don't think it's still exactly paper-based, but until relatively recently it was. You have to remember what you listen to and report it. So it's slightly a blunt instrument, but it still will show the trends from year to year, because they pick a demographics and people who will represent the national audience the way that statistically they can. So that's how it's captured, and then it's done in quarterly waves that overlap. So in effect, the figures that you see will stretch over and be influenced by the previous 4 quarters. So if you get a really bad survey in one quarter, it might drop away. You might have to wait a year for the effects of it to drop back, if that makes sense. So in theory, it's meant to all even out. But like I say, these things are really critical for the commercial radio broadcasters that need to set their rates based on the exact number of people tuning in to hear an advertiser's message. For RNZ, it's the trend, it's the reach, it's the stuff that they need to then inform their strategy about. Because, nowadays, as we know, radio is just one of the things that RNZ does.
Excuse me. About 4 minutes at the end here, Cole, to talk about, David Seymour, who, as well as being the debut guest on Herald now, was also the focus of a couple of deep dives this week.
Yeah, interesting, as well as his appearance there. So I'll be waiting to see this edition of Mutter Reports by Mihi Forbes. That's on the RNZ website. It's all about the foreign influences, what's called the foreign influences that have helped shape David Seymour's agenda. And that's because there was this sort of intriguing clash, and even a rule-breaking one, in Parliament between Mihi Forbes and David Seymour that appeared on the ACT Party's channel last month. Here's a bit of it.
I wish you all the best with your taxpayer-funded crackpot documentary. We've seen your questions, and I think you're a joke.
You, sir.
Yeah, sorry.
You're the party of democracy. In the spirit of democracy, when am I meant to get a reader to do my job?
Excuse me. Hi, folks. How you going?
Did you say to an ACT candidate that the reaction to your treaty policy would be like civil war?
No, I don't believe I've said that.
The work you did in Canada on Indigenous policy, are you using that as a roadmap for ACT's treaty policies?
I didn't do any work on Indigenous policy.
Do you still share the views of Dr. Tom Flanagan?
I think he's a professor of politics who's written a lot of things. I think some of them are very right.
Yeah, so a bit going on there, but what that was all about was they were walking into Parliament in the bridge. Mihi Forbes was standing in an area where you're not really meant to approach the politicians. So a bit of pushing the envelope there, let's say, and then she continued to get... So these are questions she wanted to put to him about whether this experience he had in Canada, working with, in particular, an analyst called Tom Flanagan, who's a controversial figure there. He was arguing that Indigenous groups could be kind of liabilities in the political discussion and economy of Canada. So she's interested in whether this might have influenced his approach in ACT approach to, so-called race-based policy and things like that, and the Treaty Principles Bill. So he didn't want to answer the questions, so she decided to get answers that way. But it's interesting, David Seymour's response, because this these questions have come up before from Mihi Nanangi Forbes. He hasn't wanted to answer, for example, about the Atlas network and questions about that, whether they might have had an influence on him. And I can't see why he doesn't just answer the questions, because other people have raised these too, but pushing back, dismissing it as crackpot. And interestingly, taxpayer funded, he's a shareholding minister and taxpayer-funded state-owned broadcasters, including this one. So I can't quite see why he doesn't answer those questions and be done with it, because he's perfectly confident and capable interviewee.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was happy to answer searching questions on the front page of the Listener this week.
Yes, indeed, he was. Deputy Dave, they're calling him. That was a kind of piece summing up his career so far as he prepares to become the Deputy Prime Minister. And, Daniel went into a bit of history and made some interesting observations, saying, look, he's not actually an especially unpopular politician, even though he gets critical media coverage, and that people sort of confuse his politics with assuming his intentions are malign. But, when he acts with such bombast as he does with Mihi Nanangi Forbes there, that kind of plays up to that image, and I don't know if that always sort of works for him.
Well, there's plenty more that we could talk about, but we're running out of time, Colin, so I will say to you, thank you very much. And
we should talk about fly-on-the-wall football documentaries another time.
Another time.
Auckland FC one is definitely something that would be worth looking at.
Indeed. Being a bit of a connoisseur of football documentaries, I'm looking forward to watching that. Colin Peacock, always nice talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks. See you in a couple of weeks.
That is Colin Peacock, one of the Mediawatch team who are along every Wednesday